everyone, it is Hailey, aka Hailey's Hobbies, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to a new video. And as you can see by the title of today's video, we are reading Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So, full transparency, if you see any differences in this copy versus what I showed you at the beginning of this video, it's because I already read like 10 chapters of this, and then today I decided that I wanted to make a video about it, so I tried to recreate my little annotations and stuff. So I have the leftover sticky notes of me duplicating this that I'll just use in a different classic. But anyway, hello, hi. If you're new to my channel, please ignore my toilet, it's very loud. This is a common occurrence. My name is Hailey, I recently graduated, I'm job searching, and I've changed my channel because I want to talk about my hobbies, which include knitting and reading. So today we're doing a reading video, and yeah, we're reading Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I just had the strongest urge to read this book now. I've been doing sort of like a classic every 2 months. Kind of challenge for myself. I really love reading classics. I started really seriously reading classics about a year ago. May 2022, I read Emma actually, and I figured out that a good way for me to understand classics was to follow along with the audio. So I'll just find it on YouTube and read and listen to the audio, and I find that really helps me, and I found that really kind of made classics more accessible to me. The language of classics can obviously be very tricky, and I just found that if I were to listen with follow along with an audio, that really helped. And then don't be afraid to use Spark Notes. Sometimes if I'm not sure what just happened, I just go into Spark Notes and then I understand what happened. Yeah, so I thought we could read Sense and Sensibility together. I thought I could I don't know, it sounded like a fun idea. This will be my 5th Jane Austen. I've read Emma, Persuasion, Pride and Prejudice, and Northanger Abbey, I think in that order. Yeah, and then this is the 5th one, and then I have Mansfield Park still, and then I will be done with her 6 major works. My edition is super pretty. This is the Signature Classics Barnes & Noble editions. These are their newish ones, I think, that they started making, and it's sort of a way to give them really pretty, very pretty editions that are at a better, more affordable cost. So this edition was $7.95 for this beautiful, stunning edition, and you get, the inside is so pretty as well. It has the little there's little Jane Austen in there, and then the other edition that I have of it also has it in there. And this one has a bright pink inside. And they include an introduction, they have a timeline, endnotes, stuff based on the book, so I guess maybe movies or something, and then further reading. And then on the back they have I guess a famous quote. I haven't gotten to this one yet, but it says, "I wish as well as everybody else to be perfectly happy, but like everybody else, it must be in my own way." So what y'all saw me doing a little while ago was just kind of prepping the book. Like I said, I did this yesterday, but I got the idea to film this today, so we did a little fake preparation, but I will show y'all what I did. So on the first page of all the classics that I read, I really love to make a little annotations guide, as well as kind of my first impressions, kind of what I'm feeling about the book right away, prior to reading it. So I have them in all of my classics, pretty much, except for Wuthering Heights and Emma, because those two I hadn't done this annotation style, but whenever I reread them, I will. But for annotations, I just use highlighters, just the ones that I have. So majority of them are the Stabilo Swing Cool highlighters, and these ones are nice. They're nice and pastel, which I really love. And then for the yellow, so I used up the yellow because that's usually the highlighters that I use up first. for school. And then I have a bunch of mild liners, but I don't have any. I've used up all my pastel ones, and so I just kind of have like the leftovers from like random packs that I haven't used up. But I have a brown, which this is my beloved brown highlighter. And it's mild liners are really cool because they have like a double pointed kind of thing with them. And so those are the colors I use, and they each stand for something different. I will usually put my little annotation key at the beginning, like I said, if I can find it. This is what it looks like, and I've just kind of taped it down with some tape. Anyway, so colors. Pink is for things that I just love, so a lot of like romance kind of things, and just I don't know, if there's like a very passionate line, I'm like, yes, I love this. And then orange are for things that made me laugh, which there tends to be a lot of that in Jane Austen because she's very like satirical, and I just find her writing to be funny. I find a lot of classics to be funny, even if they're not meant to be funny, like, but like present day they just come off more funny, if that makes sense. Yellow is for things for like WTF and like OMG, like things that are shocking, things that I'm just like green is for things like nature and just kind of like pretty like imagery kind of stuff. There's not a lot of that in Jane Austen. She doesn't really describe nature a whole lot. It's not really her thing, so I don't really get to use that highlighter a whole lot when I read Jane Austen, but occasionally there are some things like that. Blue are for things that hurt my heart. Wuthering Heights was just so much blue. And then purple are for quotes that I like. And then last but not least, I've actually added a new color this time. So normally I just use those colors. However, I wanted to add in a brown for things that disgust me because I was reading A Room with the View, and some of the characters, what they said, I was like, excuse you. And so I added brown for like things that like kind of like disgust me. And it doesn't have to be like gross things. It could just be like, are you kidding me? Like, you misogynistic dude. So yeah. And then on the cover, which I normally don't do, I like doodled around it. I just put some flowers, and then I ended up defining sense and sensibility because I was like, what makes the two different? Anyway, so sense is good judgment, wisdom, or prudence. And then sensibility is like sensitivity, sympathy, or emotionality. So two kind of like different things. Yeah, that's the front of that. And then I have slowly been reading a couple chapters. And if you're curious, this is kind of what my annotations look like. So let's talk about the plot. We're going to talk about spoilers because I want to talk about this book. But I'm only 10 chapters in, so there's not really much happening, but I will give y'all the rundown of sort of what the book is about, and then kind of what I read up to. So we kind of have two main characters. We have Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood. They're both sisters. Eleanor is the oldest, and then Marianne is the middle child, and then they have a younger sister named Margaret, I think. And they're two quite different kind of personalities, sense and sensibility. So Eleanor is more of the sense side of things. She kind of falls for Edward Ferrars, who, according to Marianne, is quiet, self-effacing, and rather dull. And she's like, how could my sister, who's so witty and charming, fall for him? And like, if they are in love, why don't they shout it to the world? Like, why are they so quiet about their love? And then we have Marianne, of course, who, as you might be able to tell, is the sensibility one, the one who's more emotional, more sensitive, and stuff like that. And she kind of starts, her kind of love interest seems to be the dashing and passionate John Willoughby. So I'm curious to see what happens because we've already met the two love interests like right off the bat within the first 50 pages. I wonder if they do end up becoming the love interest. I actually don't know anything about Sense and Sensibility, sort of like the outcome, because I feel like everyone knows like Pride and Prejudice, like the outcome of that. And then like I was spoiled for Emma, and then Persuasion I kind of already knew, so I'm curious to see what happens. But essentially in the first 10 chapters nothing has happened really. Marianne and Eleanor and their mom and their sister lived in this house. Their dad had passed away, and he was actually married to another woman prior to marrying their mom. I think she passed away, and they had a son in that marriage who inherits everything about where they're like who inherits everything, including like the house that they're living in. And Marianne and Eleanor's dad was like, can you like just help them as you would family, you know, because they're your family, even if they are your half sisters, they're still your family. And essentially the brother's wife kind of convinces him not to support them as much as the father would have wanted. So instead of giving them like £1,000 each, I think, to their dowry kind of thing, he ends up giving them 500. I think, I don't know the exact numbers. And eventually the Dashwoods decide to leave that house because they're just like not really welcome there, and so they start living in a cottage, and that's where we are now. Edward, Eleanor's love interest, was at the previous house, although now that we're at the new house, they haven't seen him yet, but I think they've only been there for like 2 or 3 days or something. And then Marianne and the little sister Margaret were out for a run one day, or like walking, and then it started raining, so they ran back, and as they were running, Marianne sprained her ankle, and lo and behold, a dashing gentleman scoops her up and takes her back to the house, which I thought was really cute. So that's Willoughby, and so those are the 2 love interests. But there's also another dude named Colonel Bernard or something. I might totally have that wrong. Colonel Brandon, who's like 35, and it seems like he's interested in Marianne, who's 17, so quite the age difference, and she literally says he's old enough to be my father. And so basically Marianne is being liked by both Willoughby and Colonel Brandon, and then you have Eleanor and Edward liking each other, but I think Eleanor kind of likes Brandon now. I made like a little prediction of who I think is going to end up with who. Eleanor will end up with either Edward or the Colonel, and then Marianne will either end up with Willoughby or the Colonel. But I'm curious, I saw something on SparkNotes when I was reading that like Willoughby and Marianne's relationship kind of like something happens, so maybe she doesn't end up with Willoughby and she ends up with the Colonel instead. Yeah, that is Sense and Sensibility so far. My plan, I think, is to kind of update y'all maybe every 5 to 10 chapters, or when something kind of big happens. I don't know if this video is going to be interesting to anyone, but I did think it'd be a fun video to make. So yeah, without further ado, let's get to more reading. Hello. So I'm almost about 1/4 of the way through Sense and Sensibility. According to Goodreads, I'm like 19% of the way through. Things are starting to go down. I'm curious what's gonna happen, because I feel like this book is so short, or not short, but like we've met all the characters, I think, and like, but there's still all this in the book, so I'm like, what's gonna happen? So I've hit chapter 15, so I read about 5 chapters today. Willoughby and Marianne's relationship just keeps like growing, and to the point of like improprietariness, I don't know, to the point of it being like improper. And Eleanor is having trouble like having no friends there, or like no real connections except for Colonel Brandon, and Colonel Brandon is like, why doesn't your sister like want second attachments? And Eleanor is like, well, my sister believes in true love, or like love at first sight. There's like a point where like Willoughby tries to give Marianne a horse, but Eleanor talks some sense into her, pun intended. Right, is that even a pun? I don't even know. And then Colonel Brandon is gonna like, what does he do? He like plans like an excursion but then he gets a letter and he immediately has to leave, and everyone's like, why can't you just postpone it? And he's like, no, I have to go, like, right now. And Miss Jennings is like, I think it's Miss Jennings, I don't know, one of the characters, it's like, it probably has to do with his daughter. Yeah, so I'm wondering if maybe he like had, I guess, like a previous marriage and like the wife passed away or something. But I was like, oh, the tea is good. There's like this point where Marianne and Willoughby kind of go off on their own, and turns out they were at like his, it's not his house, but he has this old relative who's like dying, and she's there, and so Willoughby took Marianne to that house, and that woman didn't know because like she can't get out of her room because that's how unwell she is. And so then Eleanor figures this out and is like, girl, what the heck, like that's like, no, because it's like really like rude and improper and all of that. And a couple other things happen, and there's this day where Willoughby is at the Dashwoods' house, and the mother is talking about doing some like renovations, and Willoughby is like, absolutely not, I love this house the way it is, which I think is fishy. And then the next day he comes back to hang out with Marianne, and then Eleanor and the mom come in, and Marianne is like crying, going to her room, and Willoughby's trying to like get out of the house, and it turns out he has to go to like London, I think it is, on business, and will probably not return to Devonshire for the rest of the year. Everyone thinks that the two, Marianne and Willoughby, are secretly engaged because they've been spending a lot of time together and they only seem to have eyes for each other. Eleanor is really the only person who doesn't think they're engaged. She specifically said, like, I confess, replied Eleanor, that every circumstance except one is in favor of their engagement, but that one is a total silence of both on the subject, and with me, it almost outweighs every other. So that's what has happened these past couple chapters, and I am getting really annoyed with Marianne and Willoughby. They are so annoying. It's basically like when you have a friend who gets a boyfriend and then she basically drops all of her friends and only spends time with him, you know, kind of like that. And then like, it's just like they don't really have any respect for other people. And I feel like Willoughby is really bringing out like the worst in Marianne, because I feel like she wasn't as, I mean, she had her problems like prior to Willoughby. She has said some things because he has said some things. Like, he is like, when they were talking about the house reno, he's like, I don't want anything to be changed. And then Marianne was like, do not be alarmed, nothing of the kind will be done, for my mother will never have enough money to attempt it. And then he goes, I'm heartily glad of it. May she always be poor if she can employ her riches no better. And I don't know if that was as rude as it was meant to be, but that came out really rude to me. So definitely my favorite character on here right now is Eleanor, just because I feel like she does have a lot of sense. I don't know, if I was in this time, I would probably be a lot like Eleanor. I would love to be like Marianne, just because like love at first sight and all of that's really cute, but like I feel like I'd probably be a bit more like Eleanor and be like, girl, stop. Also, if you're gonna read like the spark notes kind of things, don't read like the analysis part, just read the summary of the chapter because it will spoil things. Hello everyone. So, I am now 20 chapters through Sense and Sensibility, and there are 50. I think I'm almost at volume 2 actually. I think it ends after chapter 22. And I wonder if there's like a volume 3. Yeah, it looks like there's a volume 3 as well. Anyway, so what has happened so far? Not much. So I don't know where we left off, but Willoughby left and Marianne is like super upset, but eventually things kind of, she gets happier again. There's this point where her and her sisters are walking. They just went for a walk and Edward shows up. So we have some time with him and a little bit with like Eleanor. And they just talk about stuff, and he has like a ring with hair in it, and it's Eleanor's hair, it seems, which I feel like is super gross, but we're not gross, but just kind of weird. I don't know, I guess that was like a common thing back in the time because it's brought this up a few times. And then he ends up leaving, and then like a few new characters kind of come in. They're called it's Mr. and Mrs. Palmer, and it's so sad, I feel like, because Mr. Palmer never acknowledges his wife, and she's always like, oh, he's so funny, that's how he is. Essentially, she just keeps like trying to get the sisters to come over, and then Miss Palmer kind of is like, oh my gosh, like Marianne and Willoughby are like engaged. I've heard that from Colonel Brandon. And Eleanor is like, what the heck? And then she's like, you know, I was gonna marry Colonel Brandon, but my parents had high standards. And Eleanor's just like, okay. But I'm kind of like, I'm just sick of Marianne. Now that Willoughby's gone, she's a bit more like not as annoying, because now like she doesn't echo his thoughts as much, I feel like. And then I really like Edward because he's very relatable. Basically he has no like desire to do anything like crazy with his life. He just kind of wants a simple life. And then Edward, I just think is kind of funny. He'll say some things. He's very much more reserved, quiet, dry. Marianne thinks that he doesn't love Eleanor just because he doesn't have like the loud love that that Marianne and like Willoughby kind of share. Eleanor and Edward are much more quiet, and like reserved, again with like the sense versus the sensibility. And I honestly really love like the idea of like a quiet love. Like, it doesn't have to be shouted to the world, it can just be between you two. But Eleanor is kind of like wondering, does he, like, are you my lover, you know? Because during this whole visit that he's here, he's very like reserved, more than usual, just kind of like standoffish almost. On the back of this edition, it has like a quote, and it says, I wish as well as everybody else to be perfectly happy, but like everybody else, it must be in my own way. And I thought Eleanor was gonna say it to like Marianne and just be like, hey, like just because I don't love loudly doesn't mean I don't love at all, like, or something, you know, like I love quietly and that's good enough for me, and like I don't have to love loudly like you do. But it was actually Edward. So like he was talking with the mom, Miss Dashwood, Mrs. Dashwood. He was going like, I shall not attempt it. I have no wish to be distinguished, and I have every reason to hope that I never shall. Thank heaven I cannot be forced into genius and eloquence. And then the mom is like, you have no ambition, I well know. Your wishes are all moderate. And then he goes, as moderate as those of the rest of the world, I believe. I wish as well as everybody else to be perfectly happy, but like everybody else, it must be in my own way. Greatness will not make me so. Kind of really like Edward. He also says, but I'm foolishly shy, and that I often seem negligent when I am only kept back by my natural awkwardness, which I really relate to. I'm now wondering if Marianne and like Edward end up together for some reason, because they had like some interactions where like he seemed to like really know her and like really like her. Not like love, but just seemed to be really happy with her. And I don't know if it was like more of a brotherly sister kind of thing, but now I'm like, like, I don't know, if it's anything like a normal Jane Austen, then I think they'll just end up with Edward and Willoughby. Yeah, so I'm just curious what else is gonna happen in the time that we have here. Okay, so if you haven't finished volume 1 of Sense and Sensibility, I would maybe stop this video until you have, because I'm about to say a major spoiler. I am flabbergasted. Edward's been engaged for the past 4 years to a different character that we just met. So, poor Eleanor, oh my god. I read that, and like normally how I like annotate things is that I like underline with like my highlighter, just because I don't like highlighting it completely because I feel like it's very distracting. But I literally highlighted the when she said this, because I was like, what? So we get into like, I don't know, meeting some new characters, just, and then, you know, just whatever. And like Lucy is one of the new ones, and she's like talking with Eleanor and stuff. And then she's like, I'm gonna like confide in you. And then she was like, I'm like engaged, or not, I don't think she mentions engagement yet, but like she's like talking about talking to Mr. Ferris, and Eleanor's like, oh, Robert Ferris, like the younger brother, I think. And then Lucy goes, no, his eldest brother, Edward Ferris. And then Lucy is like, I know he had the highest opinion in the world of all your family and looks upon yourself and the other Miss Dashwoods quite as his own sisters. And then even goes on to say, like, he was always particularly afraid of his sisters suspecting any things. And I was like, ouch. But then, like, she's like, Eleanor is like, may I ask if your engagement is of long standing? And Lucy goes, we've been engaged these 4 years. Yeah, talk about a plot twist. I was not expecting that at all. I knew there was going to be something that came up just because of the Jane Austens that I've read. Usually there's like something that kind of comes up, usually the no money part, or just not a good man. But I haven't gotten to like an engagement kind of thing, like he's already engaged but he's like taking liberties with you or whatever. I feel like it's a good thing that I went into this not knowing the outcome, because pretty much for all of the Pride and Prejudice I knew the outcome, so I just didn't really love the book as much as like everyone else, because I had already seen the movie and just known so much about the characters. And then Persuasion, I knew that she was going to end up with guy. I don't want to like spoil too much of the other ones. I feel like most people know Pride and Prejudice, but like her other novels maybe not. But I kind of knew who what's her name, Anne, I think, in Persuasion, who she was going to end up with, because at the same time I had like watched the movie trailer for the Netflix adaptation, and I wanted to read the book before I watched the movie, and the movie was awful, but the book was great. But I knew that she was going to end up with the particular person, although I was surprised like what happened with like the other kind of dude. But then I also read Emma, and that I accidentally spoiled myself on. I feel like if I hadn't spoiled myself, I would have been really surprised. And then Northanger Abbey, I think because it was just so short, I just knew that the people were going to end up together. Now I'm wondering, does like Edward and Eleanor end up together, and do Willoughby and Marianne end up together? Because now I don't know, because especially because of this engagement stuff. So I'm wondering if maybe like, because the engagement is so long, does like Lucy end up calling it off, and then Edward and Eleanor get together? Or does Eleanor kind of get together with Colonel Brandon because she likes him, like sees him as like an acquaintance? And then Willoughby, I just don't know what's up with him. We don't really know a whole lot about him. He just kind of up and left. And so I'm curious to see like if that actually happens. But yeah, so I finished volume 2. And now I'm starting, I finished volume 1. Now I'm starting volume 2, chapter 1. And yeah, I don't know how much of this I'm going to read. Maybe I'll read up to chapter 5, because these don't look very long. Wow. Anyway. Was not expecting that. Hello. So, this is very bad lighting, is it not? I have been reading Sense and Sensibility. I actually didn't read this yesterday. Just wasn't in the mood. I started reading The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics, which I've been enjoying. Today, I've been reading Sense and Sensibility, and oh my god, so many things have happened. Is that any better? That might be a little better. So we're just gonna stay at this weird angle. Anyway, I have 5 more chapters till I hit volume 3. I think where we left off, Eleanor had learned that Lucy and Edward were engaged, and then just like some talking happened, and there was like a conversation between like Eleanor and Colonel Brandon about like, I hope he deserves her, like referring to Willoughby and Marianne and yada yada yada. Colonel Brandon is in love with Marianne, even though they've hardly ever talked. So Willoughby has been ghosting Marianne, and Marianne is kind of like that scene in Twilight where Bella is sitting in the chair and the camera's going around her with the months passing. Like she is inconsolable. She is just distraught. It is like Bedward. Oh my god, it is like Bella without Edward. We start off kind of where I started off reading this morning, where they're at like a party and Marianne sees Willoughby and she's like, oh my god, I need to go to him. And Eleanor was like, calm down, we're in public, like do not betray what you feel to everybody present. Eventually he comes over because like Marianne's like, hello. And he essentially really only addresses himself to Eleanor as opposed to Marianne, and Marianne's like, what is going on? And so I just felt really bad for her because he just was not like paying attention to her. Instead, he was talking to this other woman. Do you see where this is going? Like eventually Marianne like writes to Willoughby and is like, what are you doing? Like, why did somebody like say something about me that like has lowered your opinion of me? Well, Willoughby answers back and it's like, but if I've been so unfortunate as to give rise to a belief of more than I felt or meant to express. This man played with Marianne's feelings and has ended up engaged to another woman, the woman that he was talking to at that party. Marianne is just even more inconsolable. So everyone thought Marianne and Willoughby were engaged, but like they hadn't like publicly announced it. And Eleanor was kind of holding on to the fact that they weren't engaged, but she kind of was like, I believe everything, but like I still need like that confirmation. Like I believe everything except the only reason why I think they are not engaged is because they haven't said anything about being engaged. And so Marianne is like, no, we were never engaged. And so Eleanor thinks that like Willoughby ending up engaged with another woman while previously engaged to Marianne is like makes him an unprincipled man, which he is. But it turns out Marianne and Willoughby were never engaged. He just like played with her feelings. There's this part where Eleanor is like, you cannot like go out and feel these things, and Marianne is like, but I cannot, I must feel, I must be wretched, and they are welcome to enjoy the consciousness of it that can, referring to like other people seeing her this way, which I feel like just explains perfectly like Sense and Sensibility, because Eleanor is like, you gotta keep it in, and Marianne is like, I cannot. So yeah, and the word cruel was used over and over again, so I literally put Alexa play Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift. But anyway, eventually everyone hears about the engagement, and then Miss Jennings, who I really don't like because she's just super annoying, she does say something funny where she's like, and I wish with all my soul his wife may plague his heart out, which I thought was funny. But she just kind of ends up saying all the wrong things that like Marianne just does not want to hear, but like Miss Jennings thinks she's helping and stuff. Eleanor just keeps trying to comfort Marianne, and eventually they figure out that the woman that Willoughby is engaged to has like 50,000 pounds to her name, whereas like I think Marianne and Eleanor only have like 1,000 or 2,000. And then of course Miss Jennings is like, LOL, her and Colonel Brandon will now be married soon. And it's like, girl, like read the room. Marianne just had her heart broken. Like, no matter how much I like don't really care for Marianne because I think she's annoying, it is sad that like this man like played with her affections and then was like, LOL, I'm getting married to someone else. But wait, there's more. So anyway, Colonel Brandon comes and visits and is like, is your sister okay? And Eleanor's like, yeah. And then he's like, I need to like tell you something about like William. I keep wanting to call him William. Willoughby's character. And through this, he like shares his own like romantic history, which was a little confusing at first because it's like I made like a little flowchart. So essentially, this is where shit goes down. Colonel Brandon was in love with this woman named Eliza, and they were even going to go like elope with like in like Scotland, but a maid kind of like spilled the beans, and so the dad was like, what the heck? And so then Eliza ended up marrying Colonel Brandon's older brother because I think she had money, and so it was like to help with the like fortune and stuff of like the estate. And obviously the older brother gets all the money, so, or in like the estate and everything is passed down to him. So that's why he ended up marrying, or she ended up marrying the older brother. And so Colonel Brandon's heartbroken. Oh, and then he's like, she reminds me, like, Marianne reminds me of, like, my Eliza or whatever, which I think is gross, but I think that's, like, the only reason why he loves Marianne, but there's more. So Eliza and the older brother, like, after 2 years, end up divorced, and Eliza is, like, just repeatedly seduced by, like, men and stuff. And so she ends up having a daughter, also named Eliza, and I don't know if it's the brother's daughter, or if it's like just like from one of the affairs that she had after getting divorced, but she ends up with the daughter. And Colonel Brandon finds her one day after the divorce, and she has like her 3-year-old daughter at that point, and she's dying. And so Colonel Brandon takes care of the daughter. So he takes care of the daughter Eliza, who ends up going on a trip with friends. Guess who's there? Willoughby. And guess what happens? Guess, just guess. I don't think you'll be prepared for this, because I was not, Jane Austen, I was not expecting this, because like most of the time, a lot of things that happen have to do with like money or like prior engagements or whatever. This I was really shocked by. So the daughter who Colonel Brandon is caring for kind of like gets lost, if you will, just hasn't been keeping in contact for like 8 months, 12 months or whatever, however long it is. And finally she sends Colonel Brandon an email. Oh my god, what is it called? She sends Colonel Brandon a letter, and this is why back in the previous like pages of the novel he ends up like leaving abruptly. I don't know if I ever mentioned that, but there's like this meeting where he leaves abruptly. Well, it's the daughter, I keep wanting to say messaging him. It's the daughter sending him a letter saying, hey, this is what happened. Yeah, she got pregnant. Willoughby seduced her and got her pregnant. And she had a baby. What? I was not expecting that, because obviously of the Jane Austens I've read, and like I've been saying, things usually have to do with like money, or like engagements, or just like questionable character. We've never had like a baby, I don't think. So yeah, so it turns out he has this secret, like, illegitimate child. Is she considered illegitimate? I don't know. I guess because they're not, like, married, apparently. Willoughby got a girl pregnant. He played with Marianne's feelings, and now he's married a woman for money. So his character is just, like, up in the air right now. No one really likes him, kind of in, like, a little friend circle. And, like, Lady Middleton is, like, it's very shocking. But, like, she's still, like, gonna leave her calling card to Miss Grey because she's about to be in a lot of money. And, like, so basically everyone is like, oh my god, but they're not being genuine. Only the people who are genuine are, like, Eleanor, the mom that they kind of looped in, and then Colonel Brandon, who, like, just feels really bad. So that's where we are. I was not expecting all of that to happen in 5 chapters. What I love is when, like, Jane Austen includes letters, because that's when I know shit's about to go down. And so, like, I flipped the page to read this letter from Willoughby, and I was like, here we go. And away we went. I'm gonna try and finish volume 2 today, I think. I've just kind of been reading like 5 chapters a day, but I do kind of want to finish up the end of volume 2, because I only have like 4 chapters of that left. I'm assuming now that we've kind of like heard more about Willoughby, and he's kind of like, he's engaged now and everything, and that's like done and over with, we'll get more like Colonel Brandon, and we'll probably get some stuff with Edward, because Lucy, the woman who is engaged with Edward, like secretly has kind of come back into town. So I'm curious what's gonna happen. I'm thinking now that Eleanor and Lucy are gonna kind of break off their engagement, and Eleanor and Lucy Edward and Lucy are gonna break off their engagement, so then Eleanor and Edward get together, and then I'm thinking somehow Marianne ends up liking Colonel Brandon and they end up together. Alternatively, Colonel Brandon comes to his senses and realizes that he's only spoken like 2 words to Marianne and spoken so many words to Eleanor that he ends up falling in love with Eleanor, and they get together, and then Marianne is just left on her own because she's still a child. Not a child, but she's still younger. I got book tabs. So I don't normally tab my books just because I highlight so much sometimes, but I was like, you know what, let's at least like try it. So I bought a bunch. I got this pack of like 14 different colors. So these are all the tabs that I got. I'm very excited to use these. So I thought we could tab up Sense and Sensibility and pick out some colors. I don't know what I want to do because I was just going to match them to the highlighters, but I'm kind of living for the idea of doing like different shades of purple, but also I kind of want the shades to be different enough that I know like what they're referencing, if that makes sense. So maybe I will just do the same shades. I think I'm a tab girly. Look at that. That is so pretty. Oh my gosh. And I made it like super close to the like edge because I just didn't want them to stick out a lot. I think that's what I don't like about tabbing is when they stick out so much, but I much prefer this. Yeah, I had to like stop tabbing all the things that I thought were funny because I was just running out of orange tabs. So I kind of only tabbed the things that I thought were funny when I like was going back through them. And then I ran out of blue actually because there was a lot of things that made me sad in this book. So I had to pick a different blue, but the blues are basically the same color, so they don't even look different. But yeah, I'm obsessed with this. I wish there was a better way to like show y'all how pretty this is. I'll update y'all when I finish volume 2. Hello everyone. Please ignore the lawnmower. My neighbor has decided to lawn mow right as I wanted to talk with y'all. Anyway, I love this book so much. It is so good. Oh my gosh. I think this is my favorite Jane Austen. I still have Mansfield Park left to read, but of all of the Austens, like my top 3 would be Persuasion, Emma, and Sense and Sensibility. And then the bottom 3, well, I guess bottom 2 so far is Northanger Abbey and Pride and Prejudice. I feel really bad, but Pride and Prejudice just keeps getting like bumped down the the ratings just because I have loved all the other ones that I've read, except for Northanger Abbey. I don't know what it is about like this reading experience, but I love the cover, and then I was just so ecstatic to start reading it. Like I just had the urge, just the overwhelming urge to read it right then and there. And I think also just like my little tab system, I love it. And I think also part of the reason why I love this book so much is that like I wasn't really spoiled, although I have been recently spoiled for something, but like I didn't know going into it that like things would happen with like Willoughby and Edward. I thought that they were like endgame, but I feel like while this book cover does mention like that Edward and Willoughby harbor secrets and stuff, it doesn't give away like who they end up with, if that makes sense, because I feel like the past some of the past like Austens that I've read with the blurb have kind of given away or like suggested who might be the final love interest, like who they get married to. I just finished volume 2. We're about to start reading volume 3, so I'll probably read a bit of that later because I kind of want to knit for a bit. I think it's so interesting that like the sisters are going through a lot of like pretty much the same like storyline. Both Edward and Willoughby have had like or have had like other people that they're like engaged to or seeing while playing with like the sisters' affection, you know. And I think it's been interesting to see how both of them have handled it. Let's see, I think where I left y'all off left left y'all off last was that we found out that Willie got the girl pregnant. And then they just went to like a party and like talked to people pretty much. And nothing really happened. Eventually, what happens is that Marianne and Eleanor end up going to like this shop just to like exchange some jewels of their mother's. And there's this guy who's like trying to figure out like the best like toothpick case that he wants, and like apparently like lectures them about toothpick cases, who turns out later to be Robert Ferris, I think is his last name. Is that what the last name is? Yeah, which is Edward's older brother, I think, or younger. No, I think it's the older brother. There's a really funny quote where like, at last the affair was decided. The ivory, the gold, and the pearls all received their appointment, and the gentleman having named the last day on which his existence could be continued without the possession of the toothpick case, joined his gloves, and which I thought was funny. So Marianne and Eleanor's brother comes back into town, so like Mr. Dashwood, who kicked them out at the beginning of the book. Essentially, he's like, congratulations on like the prospect of like Colonel Brandon, to like Eleanor, and she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, he likes you. And she's just like, what? Turns out Edward, a lot of people are trying to get him to marry Miss Morton. And it's not like actually settled, but there's like, everyone's trying to get him to marry Miss Morton, who has like a lot of money. And obviously Lucy is secretly engaged with Edward, and like she doesn't have a lot of money and all of this, and then he's still playing with Eleanor's feelings. It's this whole thing, and I just really hate her brother because he's annoying. But essentially Miss Ferris, or like whatever her name, yeah, Miss Ferris, Mrs. Ferris, she's just like rude and awful, but Lucy is like, oh, she loves me so much. And then there's this funny scene where Lucy and Eleanor are in the same room, and Edward walks in, and Edward seemed to have as great an inclination to walk out of the room again as to advance further into it, which I thought was really funny. And Marianne comes in, poor Marianne, who has no idea that Eleanor has been like slighted and that Lucy is engaged to him secretly, is all like, oh, my dear Edward. And so I think she says like a bunch of nice things about him, and so now I'm wondering, oh, what if Marianne and Edward actually get out together? Other than Willoughby, there's no one else that she says like nice things about. She doesn't even say nice things about Colonel Brandon. Yeah, and then there's just some more meetings where people just don't like each other and pretend to like each other. And I saw a spoiler where I was trying to figure out who the heck Miss Morton was, because I was reading that and I was like, that's not Lucy, because Lucy is Miss Lucy Steele. And I don't think she's like Miss Morton's daughter or anything, if that was to like kind of explain that. And so I looked it up, right? And so it's they're two separate people. And then I was like trying to figure this out. Well, Lucy apparently ends up with Robert after Edward's and Lucy's like secret engagement is kind of like figured out, and everyone wants Edward to go with like Miss Morton. So I still don't know who the sisters are gonna end up with, which I'm happy about, because I kind of want that to be a surprise, because I genuinely don't know. I'm sure if you've read this before, you're just like laughing at my theories, but those are my theories. Hello everyone, so we are back in the apartment. I'm switching into some comfy socks right now. My room is looking a little bare. I don't know if you can tell by my desk. I moved a lot of stuff back before I went home, and then I moved even more stuff back now. But anyway, we're here to talk about Sense and Sensibility, because I finished this yesterday, or the day before, I don't remember. Yeah, I think it was the day before. My heart. Long story short, 5 stars. I really loved this. I just love how I annotated it with the page flags. I feel like that really adds to it. And I love that like I kind of doodled on the front page a bit. In terms of the characters, I love the characters, even if I hated some of them. Like I loved like the characters. I think Eleanor might be one of my new fave book characters. I just felt like she was so sensible. While we see kind of like Eleanor's story throughout the novel, we don't really see Marianne's unless it's through Eleanor's kind of eyes. So at the end, Marianne, a lot of the change that she does is like 2 years later, because the author Jane Austen kind of mentions that like 2 years later she grows up and has to start a friendship, or have started to like form a friendship with Colonel Brandon. Eventually, like she would never love so like aggressively and like suddenly as she did Willoughby, but over time her heart would grow with love to amount to the same love as like Willoughby, but just more slowly. And so that kind of like shows her maturity throughout the novel, or well, not throughout the novel, but like maturity, because like literally the second to last page we get that, whereas this whole part is just her being like Willoughby, Willoughby, Willoughby. Oh, I don't think I mentioned kind of what happened since I last updated y'all and stuff. Lucy and Eleanor kind of called off their engagement, and then Lucy actually ends up engaged with the younger brother of Edward, Robert, but Robert's technically the older brother because the mother disowned Edward for wanting to marry Lucy. But then because Robert's like the favorite child, when Robert ends up marrying Lucy, the mother loves them again, and it's kind of like implied that Lucy ended up marrying Robert for money instead, because Robert was going to get all the fortune and Edward wasn't. There was a really funny scene where Jane is like, how is, Miss Ferris? Because like they heard from someone that they had gotten married, but they never specified which brother, and so she was like, how's Miss Ferris? And he was like, what? And then I'm trying to find this because it was funny. Eleanor was like, is Miss Ferris at Longstaple? Because I think that's the house that they were gonna move into. And he was like, at Longstaple? No, my mother is in town. And then Eleanor's like, no, I meant Mrs. Edward Ferris. And he goes, oh, perhaps you mean Mrs. Robert Ferris. And then she just burst into tears of joy. Like, she's just so happy that they didn't get married. And then just 3 hours later, Edward asked Eleanor to marry him. And I literally wrote, I shipped them again. His heart was now open to Eleanor, all its weaknesses and all its errors confessed. He like mentioned that why he got engaged with Lucy was because it was just a boyhood fascination. They were close friends. And he was like, well, now obviously I don't feel that way, but I felt like it was wrong of me to like end the engagement. I wanted her to do it because like, standards and all that back then. He showed Eleanor a letter from Lucy where Lucy writes, I have burned all your letters and will return your picture the first opportunity. Please destroy my scrawls, but the ring with my hair you are very welcome to keep. Yeah, and so anyway, they end up happily together, and then within like 2 years, Colonel Brandon and Marianne end up together because she ends up loving him, which I feel weird about because obviously they haven't talked at all the entire book. I guess that would kind of really show her maturity because she, obviously talked to Willoughby and was instantly infatuated with him. And then, like, one would assume if she started talking to Colonel Brandon, she would become instantly infatuated with him kind of after Willoughby is gone now. But it takes, like, her time to, like, fall in love with him as opposed to, like, immediately being obsessed with him. I still feel weird because I'm like, they never talked in the novel like at all, and like she only ever like insulted him and like talked about how he was old enough to be her father. But they do end up together. Oh, and then Willoughby ends up married to Miss Grey, which we already mentioned when they got engaged, and he's like unhappy. He essentially kind of talked with Eleanor and was like, I didn't marry Marianne because she didn't have enough money and I could not overcome that, so F him. Yeah, it's this whole thing. My affection for Marianne, my thorough conviction of her attachment to me, it was all insufficient to outweigh the dread of poverty, or get the better of those false ideas of the necessity of riches which I was naturally inclined to feel an expensive society had increased. So he just wanted money. Shh. Willoughby ends up unhappy, and then Colonel Brandon ends up with Marianne. Oh, and Marianne like almost died. She got like a really bad fever because she would go out with like on walks for a while, and there was this whole part where I thought she was gonna die, but she ended up making it through. And so that's when she was like, that's kind of when you saw
like Marianne kind of like think through and like kind of become a bit more mature as well. Kind of see like I understand like what I did wrong in my relationship to Willoughby. And then at first I was like upset about the last line because it's literally just, it just kind of sounded like, I was like, that's it. But upon further analysis, aka me going to Spark Notes, apparently it's kind of more about like the sisterly bond as opposed to a husband bond. So it's actually a whole paragraph, the last sentence. Between Barton and Delaford, there was that constant communication which strong family affection would naturally dictate. And among the merits and happiness of Eleanor and Marianne, let it not be ranked as the least considerable, that those sisters, and almost living within sight of each other, they could live without disagreement between themselves or producing coolness between their husbands. Which at first I'm like, that's like the weirdest thing to leave off of, but I guess it just kind of means more about like a sister bond more than a husband bond, kind of like outweighs that, like a familial bond outweighs like a marriage bond. I don't know, but we're just gonna leave it at that and say sisters are better than husbands. I'm partial because I have a twin sister, but anyway, so that is Sense and Sensibility, this beautiful, beautiful book. I definitely think this is my favorite Jane Austen. I kind of wish that like all the other Austens that I read, I didn't know the outcome, because that's why I love this one so much. I just had no idea what was coming next, and I think that really enhanced like the love that I had for this. So I'm kind of really excited for Mansfield Park, but that's going to be my last like main novel from Jane Austen. But yeah, that is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So we are done. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I don't know what at all it's gonna be like. I've just been filming however long I've been like reading this, and so I don't even know if it's gonna turn out good, and I feel like it might be kind of boring to just see me reading. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!